Writers, it's Mr. Marshall at Stony Lane again. I'm coming to you because I know that you've been working really hard on your nonfiction writing, and you've done lots of different things, right? You have taken time to write in your notebook about something that you know a lot about. You've chosen a topic that you wanted to do more work with, and you've thought carefully about how to add more to it. You've nurtured that topic and developed it. You've drafted your topic. That means that you wrote out the words that are going to be in your final product, and you revised your product. You revised your writing so that you can make sure that it's the best that it could be. But today it's time for us to do one last thing before we're ready to share the writing, and that's to edit it, to make sure that you didn't make any mistakes that will make your writing harder to read. And so that's what we're going to work on today. One of the tools that a lot of real writers use is called an editing checklist. Okay. And you've probably seen editing checklists before, and your teacher may have given you an editing checklist in the past. But there's something about editing checklists that makes them like different. Okay. Because I feel like an editing checklist is sort of like a pair of shoes. It's not good for everyone, right? You have to find an editing checklist that fits you, just like you find a pair of shoes that fits you too. So today, this video is going to have two parts. The first part is all about how do you choose the editing checklist that works for you. And the other is how do you use the editing checklist once you've chosen it. You can watch this video all together and learn about both things at once, or you can break it up and watch it in two parts. It's up to you. So let's get started. So I'm going to show you 3 different editing checklists. Okay, these are my checklists. I made them up, but you can use them or you can change them, and maybe you can work together with your teacher or your writing partner on how you would change the checklist so that it fits you best. Okay, so let's take a look. I've got 3 checklists right here. This first one is what I call my Ostrich Checklist because it has a picture of an ostrich on it. Okay, and let's look at the things that are on the checklist. The first thing says, I used capital letters correctly to start sentences and names. That's something that you have to make sure you're doing if you're going to be a careful writer. Okay, and then the next thing says, I used periods and question marks correctly because you're big enough that you need to know how to do that. Okay. Let's skip and go to the next checklist. This next one is called my Walrus Checklist because it's got a picture of a walrus on it. And so the first one says I used capital letters correctly. And the second thing says I used end punctuation correctly. Do you see how that's a little different? We're talking about the same things here, but here on the ostrich, it kind of names how to use them. Okay. It names how to use the capital letters, where this one just says that you did it correctly. Here it names the periods and question marks are something you want to use correctly. And this one just says that you did it correctly. Okay. So if you're the kind of a writer who wants to have more of a reminder of what it looks like to have capitals and punctuation used correctly, you might want to use the ostrich. If you're the kind of writer that wants to go through this and you can remember what that means, you might want to use the walrus. But let me show you one more. Here's the koala. Okay, the koala takes those 2 ideas and puts them in one. I used capital letters and end punctuation correctly, like all together. Like if you think you're the kind of writer that can check all that at the same time, then you can do that. All right, let's go on. Let's look at the next thing on the ostrich. It says, I use quotation marks around the words that people said. That's on my ostrich checklist, and it's on my walrus checklist, and it's in my koala checklist. So that's the same. So I'm assuming that you're all the kind of writer that uses words that people say. And in nonfiction, that's like quoting someone about your topic, right? So you want to say that you used quotation marks around the words that people said. Let's go on and look more at the checklists. Okay, so let's look. Number 4 says, I started a new paragraph every time I started to write about a new idea or topic. Okay, so all these checklists kind of make the assumption that you are the kind of writer that uses paragraphs. Okay, and this one kind of tells you when you need to do that, and so it's a good reminder. Like I know I like reminders, and so that might be a checklist that I would use. Okay, the second one says I put all the information in the correct paragraph. This one also includes paragraphs. It just phrases it a little differently. It doesn't have the reminder in there. Okay. And the koala also has that. I put all my information in the correct paragraph. Okay. So the koala and the walrus don't have that reminder. They have other kinds of things in there. All right. And the last one is the same on all of them. I check the spelling of all my words carefully and thoughtfully. That's on all three of those. Okay. So what you should do right now is you should think which of these three checklists fits you as a writer best. Okay. And you can choose that one. Or if you want to make up a different one that kind of fits you as a writer better, you can do that too. So I'm going to let you pause the video. And if you wanted to make a decision, or you wanted to talk to your teacher, or you wanted to talk to a partner or to your parent about which one feels like it's the best fit for you, now might be a good time to do it. Or if you wanted to make your own checklist that's a little different than these three, you have time to do that now. Okay, so I'll let you click pause, and then we'll be right back. Okay, so welcome back. Welcome back. By now you've got your checklist, right? You know which checklist you're going to use. And so now we want to talk about how to use your checklist. When you're using an editing checklist, it's really important that you don't rush. When you use an editing checklist, it's something that's supposed to take a long time, okay? Because especially if you're doing something carefully, like editing is the last chance to make sure that there's no mistakes, right? Because you don't want to have mistakes for your reader, right? You don't want them to just notice your mistakes and not all the great things that you wrote. So editing should take you a while, okay? That's okay. If you're going through it really quickly, then you're not being careful, all right? So let's take a look. Now, for my writing, I have, last time I think I told you I was writing about presidents, because that was something that I was like nerding out about, that I really wanted to do a lot of writing about. And so I have another chapter here that I'm going to share with you in a minute. But I've chosen the Ostrich checklist for myself. So the first thing in here is it says I used capital letters correctly to start sentences and names. So I'm going to be thinking about that. I'm going to reread my writing, but just thinking about that, just thinking about capitals at the start of sentences and names. So let's do that. So here's my writing. This chapter is called Presidential Parties. In the 21st century, there are two major political parties. So are there any sentence, like my sentence starts with a capital, good. Are there any names? I don't see any names here. They are called Republican and Democrat. The start of my sentence has a capital. Are there any names? Yeah, the names of my two parties need to be capital. So Republican needs to be a capital R. Oops. And Democrat needs to be a capital D. I'm not worried about anything else. I'm not looking at spelling. I am just looking at capitals right now. Each party has a candidate they choose to run for the White House. The start of my sentence starts with a capital. Are there any names? Yeah, the White House is the name. It's the name of the building. It's a pretty famous name, so I'm going to make that capital as well. Okay. There used to be other parties too. One was called the Federalist Party. So there used to be other parties too. I started with a capital. There's no names in that sentence. One was called the Federalist Party. That's the name of the party, so I have to make that capital. Party. Here we go. George Washington and John Adams belonged to this party. The start of my sentence was capital. And the names George, Washington, John, Adams. Good, it's all capital. They believe that the national government should be stronger than the states. I started with a capital, and there's no more names. So I'm going to go to my checklist, and I'm going to put an X there to show that I really carefully checked that out. Okay, now I'm looking at the second thing on my checklist. I used periods and question marks correctly. I used periods and question marks correctly. So let's go back to my writing. Do I have periods in the right place? In the 21st century, there are two major political parties, period. They are called Republican and Democrat. I need a period. Uh-oh. Here we go. There, I put my period in. Each party has a candidate they choose to run for the White House. There used to be other parties too. One was the Federalist Party. I have period. George Washington and John Adams belong to this party, period. They believe that the national government should be stronger than the states, period. Okay, so every sentence has a period. I'm gonna check one more time because I want to be careful and thoughtful about this. So, candidate, White House, Party 2, Federalist Party. Yep, that's good. So I'm going to put an X here. You can put an X, you can put a check mark, you can put your name, whatever you want, just so you remember that you checked that one. Okay, and so now I'm not going to do this whole thing because I think you get it, right? I'm reading my checklist one piece at a time and going to my writing and looking just for the thing that's on that one piece of my checklist. Okay, so remember that editing takes a long time. You want to be careful about it. It's your last chance. It's your last chance to make your writing perfect because that's what people are going to remember your writing for. Okay, all the great ideas that you had in there, and you don't want them to just notice the mistakes that you might have. Okay, so why don't you try that? You can use one of my checklists, or you can use a checklist of your own, but do something to make sure that your writing is is just right. Okay, try that out, and I will see you next time.